Okay. Okay, so let us begin with 3 bows to the Buddha. 1, 2, 3. And then we do the salutation to the Buddha. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. And today is October 16th, 2021, and good morning, everybody. And here in upstate New York, it's quite a beautiful autumn day, unseasonably warm. Yesterday it reached the mid 70s, and already I see from the thermometer, it's 69 degrees outside. Probably by the middle of the day, it will also be in the 70s. Okay, so we are continuing now with our reading of the Anguttara Nikaya, the Book of Fours. And I want to take a sutta. I didn't include this in the announcement sent out a few days ago, but when I was looking over the text this morning or yesterday, then I thought it would be good to include this sutta as well. And it's a short one. It's sutta number 182, called Guarantor. And that's somebody who can provide a guarantee that something will happen or won't happen. And so here the text begins by saying that there are 4 things against which there can be no guarantor, that nobody can guarantee you that these things won't happen. Neither an ascetic, let's say renunciant, or a Brahmin, Deva, Mara, Brahma, or anyone in the world, not even the Buddha. Okay, so the first 3 are quite familiar facts of life, so that there's no guarantee that what is subject to old age will not grow old, no guarantee that what is subject to illness will not fall ill, no guarantor that what is subject to death will not die. So these are 3 sort of inevitable facts of human existence that we have to face and be able to deal with strength, with courage, with equanimity, and I would say with wisdom. Because everybody has to grow old. There's only an exception to this. The exception against growing old is that you die in youth or middle age or even younger. But if you're going to live a full natural lifespan, then one is growing to go old. And the consequence of growing old is not pleasant. I can't speak about this fully myself since I'm not yet old. Biologically, they say that I'm 76 years old, but I don't quite feel old. But the signs of aging, the hair turns gray, the skin gets wrinkled, teeth start breaking and falling out. The sense faculties start losing their acuity. Maybe I could testify to this to some extent, that the eyesight is not as sharp as it used to be. Maybe hearing is not as acute as it used to be. But these are realities that occur to us as we get older. People will get cataracts, problems with the retina, which I have a problem with one of the retinas. And the body will lose its strength, will become more difficult. Actually, I know people, even people in middle age who have problems with hips and knees. Sometimes they have to have a hip replacement, knee replacement. And when you get older, the memory is not as sharp as it used to be. The ability to learn and to pick up new information is not as sharp as it used to be. And so if we're going to live our full natural lifespan, we're going to have to face old age. And then we have the second truth or fact of life is that what is subject to illness is bound to fall ill. Of course, there are some people with extraordinarily good karma or with good physical attributes who manage never to fall ill. They live, or at least until they reach the peak of old age, they manage to maintain good health throughout their life. But I'd say the vast, overwhelming number of people face illness of various degrees of severity. And when you look at the nature of the human body from top to bottom, you see that there's virtually no part of the body which is not vulnerable to some illness. Starting with the head, even with the scalp, there will be different kinds of conditions that affect the scalp. In the brain, there will be brain tumors, strokes, deterioration of brain tissue, probably conditions like autism might be a condition stemming from the brain. Then we come to illnesses of the eyes, ears, hearing loss, loss of balance and vertigo, which stems from the inner ear, diseases of the nose, mouth, throat, then all of the internal organs, heart, lungs, kidneys, liver, intestines, all the ways down the bladder, urethra, sexually transmitted illnesses that affect the sexual organs. Then there's weakness of the legs, all the ways to maybe ringworm disease illnesses that affect the feet. And so the body is subject to, I think in traditional Indian physiology, I think they say 108 types of illnesses. And then as long as we have a body, even if we manage to live a long life, a healthy life, then we have to face death. And so death is the inevitable end of life. And so how are we going to deal with old age, illness, and death? What is the antidote? The antidote to old age is not remaining forever young. The antidote to illness is not remaining enclosed within a glass bubble with maybe people putting food through a slot so that you don't catch any illnesses. And there's no place in the world where you can escape death. You can't go to a peaceful little cottage in the Adirondack Mountains. You can't run to a desert island. You can't a remote island. You can't purchase a little island in the Bahamas or the Caribbean and think if I migrate there, I'll escape death, since death will find us out wherever we are. So what are the ways that we deal with old age, illness, and death? Okay, the Buddha gives us at least one very useful instrument for, I would say, for anticipating old age, illness, and death. And that is a theme for reflection that he teaches. It occurs in the Anguttara Nikaya in the Book of Fives. He mentions 5 themes that he says all of my disciples, whether men or women, whether monastics or lay people, should often reflect upon, frequently reflect upon, a binhang pachaveki tabba. And so the three of those five themes, three of them, I am subject to old age. I have not escaped old age. I am subject to illness. I have not escaped illness. I am subject to death. I have not escaped death. So when we do these reflections on a regular basis, then we are conditioning the mind, preparing the mind to face these conditions when they actually come upon us. Yeah, the thing about old age, I have to say, is that it creeps up on us gradually, almost imperceptibly. So in a way, this is a rather tricky one to accustom ourselves to, or even to recognize, because probably every day since you were a child, when you get up in the morning or sometime during the day, you look in the mirror. And when you look in the mirror from day to day, you don't see any change in yourself. Is that correct? You think on October 16th, I looked exactly the way I looked October 15th. And when I looked in the mirror on October 15th, I would have thought I looked exactly the same as I did on October 14th, 2021. And when I looked in the mirror on, let's say, October 14th, 1964, I would have thought that I look exactly the same as I did on October 13th, 1964. And so when one looks in the mirror from day to day, you probably don't see any real change in your appearance. And so it's difficult to recognize the transition into old age. But if we take a photograph of ourselves in 2021, and then we compare it with a photograph of ourselves in, let's say, 1964, then we would see, if we were alive in 1964, we might see quite a remarkable difference. I was going to try to see if I had a photo of myself from from the 1980s, but I don't want to go searching for it now. I want to see if anybody could recognize that that person is me. Um, okay, but this is something that one has to prepare oneself, even though old age creeps up rather slowly, gradually, imperceptibly, but still we prepare ourselves for it by reflecting that I am subject to old age. Then when we start to encounter the direct impact of old age, when we find our memory is becoming weaker, our bodily strength is diminishing, the senses are not working as sharply as in the past, then we will recognize that this is exactly what I have been expecting, exactly what I have been training myself for. Okay, so it's this practice of reflection and recognition that helps to prepare us for old age. And this also is what helps in preparing for illness. So the second theme the Buddha teaches in this reflection is Bhyadi dhammom hi bhyadim anatito. I am subject to illness. I have not escaped from illness. And illness is something that can strike suddenly. So one day we're strong and healthy, able to do whatever we want. And then an illness comes, maybe it starts to develop. One day we find maybe we're coughing, sneezing, feeling dizzy, weaker. We take our temperature, we see a beginning that our temperature is starting to rise, and then a day or two later, we might be knocked flat out with serious illness. And then we can contract even some very serious illness, not just the case of the flu or a cold or a other kind of mild illness, but it can be, cancer, or it can be diabetes, or a heart condition, or we can get a stroke. And so if we haven't conditioned the mind to face the illness, to face the fact that we are subject to illness, then when the illness comes upon us, then we can fall into a deep dejection, deep depression, into self-pity. Why does this have to happen to me? Everybody else is happy and healthy, but I'm the only one who gets ill. Or I must have done some terrible karma in the past that I have been afflicted with this illness. And so the way we prepare ourselves for the illness, of course, we have to take protective measures against illness. And during this time of COVID, even though now the COVID is, at least in the United States and in some countries, it's decreased a lot. But if any of you are living in other countries, you have to protect yourself against the illness by taking the proper precautionary measures, getting the vaccine, if the vaccine is available, when going into the public places, using a mask, trying to keep some social distancing or physical distancing. But even if we take the most stringent measures to protect ourselves, we could still fall ill. And in this case, we protect the mind from falling into these dejection, self-pity, depression, blaming others, or condemning ourselves by reflecting that illness is one of the inevitable realities of life. And that when illness comes upon us, then we recognize that that is what I have been preparing myself in advance. I've been building up that, conditioning my mind to recognize the onset of illness. And now I am in that condition itself. And this is the time that I bring forth my wisdom to acknowledge that this is part of the noble truth of dukkha. This is what the Buddha was teaching. This is what, in fact, is said in the sutta, that if there were no old age, illness, and death, there would be no reason for the Tathagata, for the Buddha to arise in the world. So the Buddha arises in the world to reveal to us, to expound to us the hard realities of old age and illness. And now when we face illness, now is the time to apply our understanding of the Buddha's teaching to address the illness with mindfulness, arousing one's mindfulness through the illness, attending to attending to the physical experience of the illness with mindfulness, whatever pains there are through the illness, without overexerting or straining ourselves too much. We could use our mindfulness to contemplate the pains and to observe the pains and discomfort, observing how even the pain of the illness is not something persistent, solid, consistent, but it's an ever-changing flow, a dynamic flow of painful moments of experience, of pains that undergo arising and passing away, crests and high crests and naders of pain. And so using mindfulness and understanding, we can accept and deal with the pain of illness with equanimity, with a balance of mind, not falling into fear, depression, dejection, and self-condemnation. Okay, the third theme is that we are subject to death and that we cannot escape from death. We're going to be dealing with this in more detail when we come to another sutta on today's schedule. So I don't want to go into this in detail right now, but I just want to point out that it's extremely important to do this contemplation because we know in the case of old age that old age is going to start coming upon us maybe when we reach our 60s, then it will become more severe when we reach our 70s, and then it will become even heavier and weightier when we are in our 80s and 90s. But in the case of death, though we would like to live a long life, to live into our 80s, maybe even our 90s, but we have no guarantee, no certainty when death will arrive. And so if we haven't prepared ourselves for death in advance, then when death comes, if death should come suddenly, unexpectedly, if we haven't prepared ourselves, the mind will maybe go into a panic that I never thought death will come. I had so many plans for tomorrow, the vacation next month, the development of my business or my career over the next few years, then my retirement in my late 60s or 70s, and here I am just maybe 42 years old, and suddenly something has happened. Maybe I got COVID and the medicines that didn't work. Now I can't breathe and death is staring me in the face. So if I haven't done any preparation, there comes a complete, like my whole world has just collapsed beneath my feet. Yeah, just a few horrible examples of this. These are really horrible examples that just appeared in the news just over the last couple of days. Probably many of you have come across this. One took place in a little town in Norway. This is really horrible. I don't want to terrify people, but people were just going about their everyday business. It was said to be such a dull, boring town that nothing ever happens there out of the ordinary. And then some madman fanatic took bows and arrows and shot them at people going about their everyday activities. In the last I heard, 5 people were struck by arrows and died. People who at the beginning of that day would have thought just another boring day in this boring, routine, very normal Norwegian town. And now out of the blue, death has arrived. Yeah, another incident, a rather shocking incident. It was a member of parliament in Great Britain, in England, was addressing a meeting of his constituents. And then again, some angry person came up to him with a knife and stabbed him, and he died. He was 69 years old, a member of parliament. He was no doubt planning his election, speaking to the constituents to deal with their concerns. He would have had the election ahead of him, thinking about the bills that he'll be dealing with in Parliament, his family affairs, and so on. And now just utterly, just like a bolt of lightning out of the sky, an angry person comes with a knife and his life is gone. And then the other event took place, and this is not completely unusual, but it's rather disturbing. It was in a Shiite mosque in Afghanistan, I think it was yesterday or 2 days ago, suicide. So these are Shiite Muslims, and then members of ISIS came into the mosque while the Shiite Muslims were at prayer on Friday prayer, and they set off the suicide bombs. And the bombs went off, and it killed, the last I heard, 43 people and destroyed a lot of the mosque. And so, we have to recognize that death can come at any time. I might just go for some reason out, into the town or into the New York City, and then something might happen and I die. And so the way to prepare ourselves for death, we can't avoid death, but we prepare ourselves by reflecting that I am subject to death, bound to die. And when we do this reflection, of course, if we're going to undergo a sudden death, there might arise, the immediate response might be thoughts of panic and fear. But we have this equipment, we have this reservoir, this accumulation of wise understanding. This is the nature of life. This is the Dhamma. This is the truth. And so when death arrives, if it comes suddenly at an early point in our life, or if we are lying on a hospital bed or a bed in our house in old age, going gradually weaker and weaker, when death is coming, we bring forth this thought. This is the reality that the Buddha was talking about. Now I have to go. And then we bring forth our mental determination and we just let go of all objects of clinging, and we pass off like a great adventure into the transition to the new existence. You could treat it a little bit like, if you've been living in the West and you've never been to an Asian country, you treat it like taking a flight to Asia. Now I'm going to see what the Asian country is like. Or if you've been living in Asia all your life and you've never been, say, to Europe or America, and you're getting on the plane, you're traveling to Europe, to the US. Now you think, now I'm going to see what Europe is like or what the US is like. And so when death comes and pulls us away from this life, we bring forth our wisdom to let go and drop our attachment and bring forth an expectation what lies ahead of this journey along the samsara, the round of birth and death. And if you have strong saddha, faith in the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha, you bring forth that faith and determination and aim to continue in your next existence following the path of Dhamma. Okay, then we come to the fourth theme for reflection. That is, there is no guarantee. Okay, let's put it this way, that there is no guarantee that bad karma that is connected with defilements, that leads back to the round of rebirth, that ripens in suffering, that leads to future birth, old age, and death. No guarantee that this bad karma will not produce its result. But in commenting on this, I would have to say that this statement has to be taken with, or has to be carefully interpreted, that it doesn't mean that all the bad karma that we have created in the past will inevitably produce its result, but rather bad karma has the tendency, it's the natural tendency of bad karma, when it finds the opportunity to ripen in suffering. That is the law of karma, that good deeds, wholesome deeds, when they get the opportunity to ripen, they bring forth favorable conditions, fortunate conditions, and ripen in happiness. Whereas bad karma or unwholesome karma, when it gets the opportunity to ripen, will ripen. Inevitably, bad karma will be part of the process leading to renewed existence, leading back to future birth, old age, and death. But when the bad karma is not inevitably bound to ripen, but when it does ripen, it will bring forth suffering. So we could say, looking at the karma from the standpoint of the Abhidharma, we distinguish the karma into, we could say, two general categories. That karma which is bound to ripen. So there are some karmas which are so strong that they are bound to ripen, that they can't be totally avoided. Other bad karmas, the other class of bad karmas, is bad karma which might ripen if it finds the suitable conditions. Otherwise, it won't ripen. And then there's actually a third category, and that is bad karma that had the tendency to ripen, but it didn't find the suitable conditions, and so it became defunct. And so our challenge, sort of as practitioners, is what can we do? Or sort of the question that arises, what can we do to neutralize bad karma, to weaken it, either to prevent it entirely from ripening, or to dilute it so that if it does find the opportunity to ripen, it will not ripen, it will not bring forth as serious, as heavy results as it otherwise might. So I was just reflecting on this question just a while ago, and I came up with 4 sort of countermeasures to prevent the ripening of unwholesome karma, or to weaken the result of karma that's bound to ripen. One method is confession. And this doesn't mean, in Buddhism, we don't have a process like in the Roman Catholic religion, where you go to the priest and you confess your sins, and then the priest will, I don't have a Catholic background, so I'm not sure what the priest does, but maybe he says, you recite 50 Hail Marys or some other penance, and that will sort of eliminate the force of the sin that you've committed. But what one can do if one recognizes that one has done something evil, something wrong, before your Buddha altar, you can do a confession that I have done something bad, I have done something wrong, I recognize this, and I regret this. And so this is a kind of confession. And if you've done something wrong towards another person, you've wronged a relative or friend, you can go to this friend or relative and apologize to them for your misdeed and ask for their forgiveness. Okay, so this is the first counteractive measure, confession accompanied by apology. Okay, a second measure is to form the determination not to repeat that type of bad deed in the future. So let's say, just to take an extreme example, say in the past, before you encountered the Buddha Dharma, or before you took Buddhism seriously, maybe you like to go fishing. And so you took the life of a number of fish, or maybe you liked to go hunting, and maybe When you were hunting, you killed animals, you shot animals. And so with that, you've committed the karma of taking life, of killing, an unwholesome karma tending to produce undesirable results. So to counteract this unwholesome karma, you undertake the precept of panati pata veramani sikapadang samadhiyami. I undertake the precept to refrain from the destruction of life, and then you make the determination in the future, I will not take life. Okay, so actually I included here two countermeasures. One is to take the precepts. That should actually be the second, taking the precepts that are opposed to unwholesome deeds. So for a lay Buddhist, we have the 5 precepts: not to take life, not to steal or misappropriate the belongings of others, not to engage in sexual misconduct, not to speak falsely, not to use intoxicants. So one undertakes the precepts, that is the second measure. And the third measure is to make the determination not to commit unwholesome deeds in the future, or you could say make the determination to uphold the precepts. So we have the 5 precepts and a more comprehensive scheme than the 5 precepts of the 10 courses of wholesome karma. Not killing, not stealing, no sexual misconduct. Then 4 regarding speech: not to lie, not to speak maliciously, to divide, to other words that create divisions between people. Not to speak angry or harsh words, and not to indulge in gossip. And then we have 3 regarding the mind: covetous thoughts, thoughts of ill will and wrong view. And so you can make the determination to follow the 10 courses of wholesome karma. Okay, so that's taking precepts, determination, and then engaging in meritorious deeds. So undertaking the precepts is one type of meritorious karma, but you can practice generosity, giving to the unfortunate, to people in need, to the poor, to the sick, and so forth, or giving protection to animals, promoting animal welfare, and other kinds of meritorious deeds, many kinds of meritorious deeds, doing religious services, making offerings to the Buddhas, to the Dhamma, to the Sangha, doing prostrations to the Buddha. So in this way, one creates wholesome karma, which will tend to counteract the unwholesome karma. So if it's very powerful unwholesome karma from the past, it will at some time will find the opportunity to produce its results. But if you have exercised these 4 counteractive measures, then it will prevent the karma from ripening as severely as it would otherwise. And if you apply these 4 counteractive measures consistently, it might even prevent the bad karma from ripening completely. Okay, so this is a discussion of these 4, let's see, these 4 themes of reflection. So maybe if there are any questions, we can see if we have questions. Okay, I see a few hands. So we'll go in order. So Samantha.
Thank you, Bhante. I just want to clarify this, the first one that Bhante referred to, confession, which I also thought understood, and I thought that was a good point. Whereas if I did something wrong and I recognize that it's wrong and in order for me to accept it, I need to have some sort of a regret
Yeah.
of what I've done,
Yeah.
and confess it and not to do it again, obviously.
Yeah.
But I've heard so many talks in Dhamma talks in Buddhism where it says one must not have any regrets at all. It's bad to have regrets. So I'm just wondering how to interpret why they say not to have regrets. Is it because the act is already done, and each time you bring it to your
Yeah.
mind, you're thinking about it and creating a new? Oh, I don't know.
Yeah,
How?
I think that's what the point is. I would sort of make a distinction amongst types of regrets. You see, I think maybe the people who are giving those Dhamma talks, maybe they're monks who are learned sort of in the scriptures. And so there's a particular mental factor or mental state called kukucha, which is sometimes translated as regret. And it means like the annoying voice of conscience that keeps on, maybe it's like a sense of guilt through which you keep on condemning yourself for doing something wrong. And so no matter what remedies you try to adopt, to apply, you keep on blaming yourself and criticizing yourself. And in that way, that feeling of regret becomes an obstruction towards one's progress. It becomes an obstructive or a hindrance to one's development. So that, I think, is the kind of regret that we say one shouldn't indulge in as a follower of Buddhism. But I say that there's a wholesome kind of regret where you recognize I've done something wrong. I shouldn't have done that. And I should try to make amends for it in some way. And that, I would say, is a wholesome quality. Maybe that is sort of the application of hiri and ottappa, the sense of moral shame and fear of consequences to the action.
Lovely. Thank you, Bhante. That makes sense now. Thank you.
Okay, I think the next one is Sud.
Yeah, thank you, Bhante. So I see the point about making determinations to kind of, against the unwholesome karma. But what if you break the determination? Because more often than not, like especially when with angry speech, there's a huge tendency in, I mean, at least in my mind, to angry speech, and then I make a determination every day. No, I don't want to be this way, and then unfortunately, you break the determination after some time. So can you speak a little bit about that? Like how, if karmically, how does that play out?
Maybe what you could do is make a determination not to break your determination. What I remember a little saying that I come across in the past. It goes 6 times down, 7 times up, a 7th time up. That means that if you make a determination to do something or to avoid doing something wrong or to do something good, even if you fail 6 times, you don't give up on yourself, but you keep on persisting so that you get up the 7th time. So if you make the determination, I'm not going to utter harsh speech, and because the mind is difficult to control, sometimes you get overwhelmed by anger, and then you will lose control over the mind, and then you speak angrily, breaking your determination. In that case, you have to recognize I failed in my keeping my determination, but I'm not going to give up. I'm going to make the determination to restrain angry speech in the future. And so when you keep on making the determination, then the force of the determination becomes stronger in the mind. And what I found actually to be a very helpful measure in my own practice over the years, and I remember I mentioned this when we started the Book of Fours back in the year, it was in the spring of 2020, when I was explaining Sama Panidi, Ata Sama Panidija in the Mangala Sutta, right determination. You find 3 faults that you have, 3 bad habits, or bad dispositions that you want to overcome. And then every day, as part of your practice, you make the determination. For example, if you tend to get angry easily, you make the determination, I will remain patient and calm even under provocative conditions. If you tend to be lazy, you make the determination, I will be diligent and energetic, not giving way to laziness. Maybe if you have a tendency to speak falsely, or let's say in order to, or to speak in ways that are intended to promote your own ego in the eyes of others, you make the determination, I will be humble and restrained, humble and respectful towards others, and will not promote my own glory. So if you make those determinations every day as part of your practice, it will strengthen those forces in the mind. So when you meet the contrary conditions, the provocative conditions, that determination will come into play and will help you maintain your determination. Does that make sense?
Yes, I guess just keep trying.
Okay, yeah, but try using the daily determination. I think you'll find after a month, 2 months, it brings its benefits. Okay,
Thank you.
well, okay, we'll move on to Ashish.
Yes, Bhante. So my question is basically, you said the precepts, yeah? We have to take the precepts every day. So the first precept of not taking life,
Yeah.
does that mean we have to be vegetarian?
No, Buddhism doesn't require vegetarianism. I actually would promote vegetarianism. I think it's a good practice, but it's not obligatory. According to the Buddhist teaching. The only thing is that one should not purchase meat in a way in which you make a request for an animal or a fish to be killed to provide you with the meat. But the Buddha allows his disciples to order meat from animals that have already been killed. Yeah, so vegetarianism is not required in the East Asian Buddhist traditions. Let's say in the Theravada countries of Sri Lanka, Thailand, Burma, even the monks are not vegetarian. So I have to say, honestly, I wish that there was more promotion of vegetarianism for monastics in those countries. So it's not required according to the Buddha's teaching, but I think it would set a good standard. Okay, but in the East Asian Buddhist countries, China, Korea, Vietnam, in the Mahayana monastic system, the monasteries are strictly vegetarian, though the lay Buddhist followers of those traditions are not strictly vegetarian, though many of them are.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, the next question is from MZ.
Thank you, Bhante. My question is about the bad karma that was actually listed in the sutta. I was wondering why good karma wasn't actually mentioned, and if the same rule applies.
Oh, of course, the same rule applies to good karma, but I think here the Buddha is mentioning 4 things that we want. Sort of the natural tendency of the mind is to be protected or safeguarded against these things, to be sort of we want to avoid old age, we want to avoid illness, we want to avoid death, we want to avoid having to encounter the results of bad karma. And so the Buddha is giving these as themes for reflection so that we recognize that we have to face old age, that we are likely to have to face illness, that we have to face death, and that we'll have to face the results of bad karma. So there's no need, we don't naturally seek to protect ourselves against the ripening of good karma. We want to encourage the ripening of good karma. But for that, we don't have to sort of train ourselves to protect ourselves against it. Yeah, that is basically the reason.
Thank you.
Okay, let us move to the next sutta that I have. And what I want to do, because I brought up the theme of death here, I'm going to skip for now over 183 and go to 184, since this is related to the same theme of Sutta 1, or similar theme to 182. So in this case, a Brahmin named Janusoni comes to the Buddha and says that he holds the thesis that there is no one subject to death who is not frightened and terrified of death. So his position is that it's almost like maybe some of the modern psychologists, theorists of psychology, who hold that the death fear is inherent in the human mind. So there's nobody who is not afraid of death. Everybody, just by our psychological constitution, we're all afraid of death. Even the so-called daredevils who like to jump, jump off high mountains, who like to sort of taunt death, even they have an innate fear of death. So that is his thesis. But the Buddha has a different point of view. He says that there are those subject to death who are frightened of death, and also those subject to death who are not frightened of death. Okay, so let us see who are those who are frightened and terrified of death. Okay, so here we have a person who is very fond of sensual pleasures, full of craving for sensual pleasures. Then he encounters some severe illness, so he knows that death is coming on. And then he thinks back of, oh, these sensual pleasures will leave me and I'll have to leave these sensual pleasures. Then he sorrows, laments, weeps, beating his breast, and becomes confused. So this is one who is frightened and terrified of death because he's still full of this attachment to sensual pleasures. And not to speak of death, but even, there are people who have fully indulged their sensual desires, especially the sexual enjoyment, in their youth and even in middle age. But even not to speak of death, when old age comes and they can't indulge in the sexual pleasures so much, then they look back with regret and think, oh, I was able to enjoy myself so much in my youth, even in middle age, but now I'm just a shriveled old man or woman, can't enjoy those sensual pleasures anymore. And then they become dejected and miserable. Okay, so this is because of attachment to sensual pleasures. Okay, the second one is the case of one who incurs some, this is a person who has strong attachment, craving for the body. In a way, this seems a bit similar to the craving for sensual pleasures. But I think in the case of sensual pleasures, the person is thinking outwardly of the pleasures that they would enjoy. But here, the person has a strong sense of identification with the body, attachment to the body, particularly maybe a person in the prime of life who has maybe beautiful body, strong, handsome, and then some severe illness comes and they know that death lies just ahead of them. And they realize that they have to give up and abandon the body. And then they become full of regrets and lamentation. And then they're terrified of death because of this identification with the body, fear of leaving the body behind. Okay, then we have a person who has not done anything good and wholesome, who has done what is evil, cruel, and defiled. Then some severe illness comes and they think, I haven't done anything good and wholesome. I haven't made a shelter for myself. That is, I haven't prepared for my next life, but I have done evil deeds. So when I pass on, I will meet the appropriate fate. So this person sorrows and laments, weeps, beating his breast, and becomes confused. So this is one that I wonder about. Maybe I'd like to know what you think about this. Let us suppose we have a person who has done evil, cruel deeds. You see, what's being presupposed here is that the person, in the background of their mind, they have some acceptance or even some inkling of the idea of karma and repeated existence, some new existence after death. And so here, because they've done bad deeds and death has suddenly come and is striking them down, now they realize that their bad deeds are going to catch up with them and they'll meet with misery in the next existence. But what about a person who has done cruel and evil deeds, but they don't have any belief in karma, no belief in existence beyond death? They have the belief this is the only life we live. We might as well enjoy ourselves. And if we don't have the means to enjoy ourselves, then we have to create those means. And so they might maybe commit theft. We could think of some of the maybe corporate executives who run factories overseas, which exploit many workers. And the workers are just working for almost starvation wages under unsanitary conditions in overcrowded factories without enough vacation time, enough leisure time. But because he's running these factories, he's making millions and able to enjoy himself. And he doesn't care because he doesn't believe in any existence beyond this life. So he owns several mansions, yachts, can go on expensive vacations, enjoy himself to the full. When death strikes that person, is he going to be overcome by this fear and terror? What do you think?
No, he's not.
Yeah, I don't. I don't think so. Any other ideas? Okay, so anyway, we'll go on to the next one. Okay, then we have someone here who is perplexed, doubtful, and undecided about the Saddhamma. This is the good Dhamma, and it's referring to now to the Buddha's teaching. And then this person has a severe illness and death is coming on, and then he thinks, now I'm perplexed and doubtful and undecided about the good Dhamma. And so he undergoes sorrow, lamentation, and then he becomes full of fright and terror over death. And then the opposite of these, we'll just go quickly through the opposites. Those who are not afraid of death. So we have somebody who is devoid of lust and attachment to sensual pleasures. Somebody who is, maybe developed a quality of renunciation, of vitaraga or viraga. Yeah, vitaraga, without lust for sensual pleasures. And so when death comes, and then he knows he has to abandon whatever sensual pleasures he might be able to enjoy, and he's able to leave them behind peacefully. And so he's not terrified of death. And again, the person is not strongly attached to the body. And so when death comes, even though the body might be dear to him naturally, but he knows now I have to leave the body. And so he can leave the body peacefully. So this one is not subject to fear of death. Okay, then we have the person who has done good and wholesome deeds. And so then the illness comes, he knows he's going to die, and he reflects, I haven't done anything evil, I've done what is good, I've made a shelter for myself, and now I will meet the appropriate fate. So again, this is the case of a person who accepts the ideas of karma and rebirth. And so as death is coming on, now because they sort of rely on their recollection of their good deeds, they have the confidence that they're going to meet a good destination, that the good karma will propel them into a happy rebirth. And so they're not frightened and terrified of death. And then we have the fourth case, somebody who is not perplexed about the Dharma, who is free of doubt, who is fixed in his faith and commitment to the Dhamma. And so when death comes, this person is not frightened and terrified. Okay, now I just wanted to just add a thought about the fourth type of person, in the case of the one who is afraid of death. Now here let us say we have a person who is a follower of another religion. Let's say we have a devout Muslim, devout Christian, and so they don't have any belief at all in what we call the good Dharma, which is the Buddha Dharma. But when death comes to them, do you think that they will be full of fear and terror over death?
No. Oh, but because they believe they are going to go to heaven.
Yeah, if a person is a devout follower of another religion, a religion that teaches continuation of the person, consciousness, or mind beyond death, and if they know that they've had strong faith in that religion, and especially if that faith is accompanied by good works, by good deeds, then I think that they'll be able to pass on to that they'll be able to leave behind this life without fear and terror of death. But now let's also take the case of a person who is a decided, determined atheist. They don't believe in any existence beyond death. They believe consciousness or mind is a byproduct of the physical body. And if they hear about Buddhism, they think, it's an interesting Asian religion, but I don't buy that reincarnation and karma business. But still, even though they don't accept any existence beyond the present life, but they have a strong sense of ethical conscience. They live a very ethical and upright life. They might do many good deeds. They might support valuable charities, be very helpful to their friends and neighbors, and so forth, work for good causes. When death comes, will this person be frightened and terrified? What do you think?
No, he wouldn't be.
No.
Yeah.
No. No, because they think good is good to do, regardless of the reward.
Yeah. Xiaolan, did you want to say? I saw your hand up. Xiaolan?
Yes, Bande. So my understanding is that monotheistic religions followers actually do experience a lot of fear upon death, that close to death, because in their belief system, it's so cut and dry. You either go to heaven or go to hell. It's very, very cut and dry. And so there's this constant worry that they're not good enough to make it to heaven. And then their only other alternative is to go to hell. So there is actually tremendous amount of fear.
Yeah. Yeah, I can't speak about this from personal experience because I'm not a follower of another religion. But I don't know. I think I've heard I don't think that's invariably the case. I think that there will be people following other religions who can pass off quite peacefully. In fact, I've heard reports about people who have lived very good, Christians who have lived very good, upright lives, and even death has come to them suddenly, but the people who have witnessed their death say that they see them pass off very peacefully, even with a happy smile on their face. So I don't think that's invariably the case, but I'd say maybe that there are certain types, particularly I would say certain types of fundamentalist Christianity, which hammer home again and again, and maybe certain brands of Roman Catholicism, which hammer home again and again the torments of going to hell. And so if the person is worried that their faith is not strong enough, then they might become overcome by fear of going to hell. Yeah, but I can't speak about that from firsthand experience. Let's see if there are some other ideas. The next is Richie.
Yeah, great to always be here with you. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I hear you clearly.
Well, I had looked into a bunch of religions after having gone to Chongyin for the 8-day loving kindness meditation years ago. And I've always been thankful for that, to be able to teach it to others. And I found that with this non-religious type of people, they are capable of doing these things that we talk about for passing on after death and continuing on with life through deeds. But there is coaxing that would be involved coming from a religious or even a Buddhist, a Christian, a Jewish mindset, so that you would be able to share what's like buried treasure to them, not putting the religious dogma forth. And I think the Buddhist teaching has ways of doing that, like prerequisites before reaching the other higher folds of the path.
Before reaching what? I didn't catch the last phrase.
Or the Four Noble Truths. Before you get there, you have to go through certain levels of the Eightfold Path.
Oh, I see. The stages of the path.
Like analogous to how they would have to hide the religious dogma and get the prerequisites to do the deeds.
Yeah, I would say that somebody who has developed a wholesome, good state of mind, either through another religion or through no religion at all, but just with a secular mindset, would be able to pass off peacefully. That's my supposition. Okay, let us just continue. We just have a couple of more minutes. So Wiley.
Yes, Bhante. Spoken to a number of people who worked in hospice with that exact question.
Yeah.
What happens to atheists at the time of death? And what happens to people with monotheists? And they all said it was strictly individual, that a lot of atheists passed just perfectly, peacefully, happily. The same thing with monotheist. And you really can't draw that distinction just based on religions. There's something very, very personal and individual about it, about whether they feel they've led a moral, productive life. Or so, yeah, I can't really see how you could really divide that into Buddha dogma, monotheistic, atheism, or anything else. It's just whether it's going to work.
Yeah, but now when you speak, that just gives me some idea about the purpose of the sutta. I think we should see the sutta, this particular sutta, not as making broad generalizations about everybody, but in a way it sort of has a practical message sort of to the follower of the Buddha's teaching, and that is, don't let yourself be overwhelmed and continually attached to sensual pleasures. Because if you sort of give up that attachment to sensual pleasures, then you'll be able to die peacefully. And again, don't be over obsessed with the craving and attachment to the body, but recognize the body is perishable and ultimately the body is anatta, non-self. And if you have that recognition, then you can leave the body peacefully without being full of terror. And in your actions, give up bad deeds and generate wholesome good deeds, then you can pass away peacefully and strengthen your confidence in the Dhamma, and that way you'll be able to pass off peacefully. So rather than seeing this sutta sort of laying down universal statements applicable to every single person, but seeing it as having a more pragmatic orientation, sort of giving advice on how to train oneself to prepare for death. And with that comment, I'm going to have to, I see that there are some more hands, but regretfully, we have to end the session because I'm going to have to go up for the meal. So thank you all for joining, and we won't be having a class next Saturday. So the next class after this will be on the morning of October 30th. But also I want to mention on the on East Coast time, the afternoon of October 30th from 1 to 3 p.m., my organization, Buddhist Global Relief, will be having our East Coast Action to Feed the Hungry, in which we give presentations about our projects and some Dharma talks by noted Dharma teachers. And so please also join us for that event. So you'll have a double Dhamma exposure on October 30th. We'll have a class in the morning from 9:30 to 11:30. Then the Buddhist Global Relief Action to Feed the Hungry from 1 to 3 p.m. Eastern Time. If you're in another time zone, you make adjustments for it. Okay, so let me just do a sharing of the merits. Akasata Chabumata Deva Naga Mahidika Punyantang Anumoditva Chirang Rakantu Sasanang. Akasata Chabumata Deva Naga Mahidika Punyantang Anumoditva Chirang Rakantu Desanang. Akasata Chabumata Deva Naga Mahidika Punyantang Anumoditva Chirang Rakantu Mang Parang. Okay, thank you again for joining, and hope to see you next time.
Thank you.
Thank you, Bhante. Very well.
Thank you, Bhante.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you,
Okay.
Bhante.
As always,
Sadhu, sadhu,
Enjoy.
thank you, Bhante.
Thank you, Bhante.
Thank you, Bhante. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu,
Thank
Bhante.
you.
Okay, I'll have to end now.
Yes. Thank you, Bhante. Sadhu, sadhu,
Okay.
sadhu.
Okay.